Welcome to Mom Days, a beautiful collective of mamas and experts sharing wisdom, inspiration, and life hacks to support us on this journey through the hazy days of motherhood. So welcome to this week's episode of the Mom Days podcast. I am very excited to have a chance to talk with Irene McKenna. And the reason being, I'll tell you, I was fangirling a little bit. I've followed your podcast and I've been listening to some of the episodes that really spoke to me. And I'm loving what I hear. So I love your style. I love what you do. Irene is a life coach. She is passionate about moms thriving and just being a mom with joy. And I think that's something we need to hear. I think that's important. You specialize in conscious parenting, relationships, and finding peace in the chaos of motherhood, which is a lot of what Mom Days is, why I named it what it was, is that idea of us just getting through the days, but we can do it with joy, right? I think it's possible. So tell me what that means to you.
So I call it blissful motherhood. I just think it's a more fun word to say. But to me, blissful motherhood is if I focus on my happiness and the foundation that which I need to build it. It's not that I'm always in this blissful or happy state. It's that I have access to it and I create that access. And when I do, more often I can catch myself in the moment. I can connect when I want to react. I have choice and I'm energetically attracting more of what I want in my relationships because I'm in a state of connection. I think we've been trained so often to live in a state of problems, to live in a state of seeing what's wrong, that when we live in that state, that's what we see more of. So when I create this foundation of bliss, it's about accessing the part of me that is connected to me first so that I can show up and connect in my relationships, in my parenting. And I naturally am going to parent from a place of consciousness. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to engage in a way that I'm asking for what I need or want so that I am sourcing myself to be the mom that I want to be. I always say patience in parenting should never be the goal. Like it's a limited commodity. It's a limited commodity, like decision fatigue. There's patience fatigue, which is why bedtime is usually so impossible because we get to the point and we've been basically what patience is, I'm going to stuff down my emotional experience so that on the outside, I can appear to be calm.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't work because it's brewing underneath and it's brewing and I'm constantly depleting that bank of patience until it just bursts forth. So this is where we build this foundation of bliss.
I love that. And it's true and I think we're demonstrating for our kids as well. If, on my side of things, I look so much at our kids' mental health and what we're teaching them. If we're just always showing that simmering under the surface, right? And then the exploding, our kids are not learning healthy habits to deal with their emotions and they run out of patience. Yeah. They can't live in a blissful state all the time, but they can certainly connect to it and learn how to connect to it at a young age. So I love that.
Yes.
That's so key. Yeah.
And our ability to hold space when they're not in that blissful state and they're having a big emotional experience also comes from our foundation.
Yeah.
I'm not getting
maturity, really.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's I'm not getting wrapped up in their emotional experience. And it doesn't mean that we sometimes don't need to take space to process. The other day I came home and my son had spilled his blueberry smoothie all over the couch and the carpet. And I was like, I need to process this for a moment. I'm going to walk away and then I'm going to come back and it's my child that of course I'm so sorry. Mistakes happen. I'm not angry and I need to process this without trying to jump one in because often what we do when we try to have enough patience is I'm trying to stem the frustration that I actually feel that now I have this purple thing all over the place versus let me deal with my emotion. And then what we're also teaching them is it's okay to take space. It's okay to deal with your emotion without just having to show up like, oh, it's no big deal. Because in that moment it was.
Or it's a huge deal and the overreaction happens. Right. Or the blah.
Yeah.
And I think it's true because if we're not in tune to who we are and what our needs are and how our emotions tend to come out,
Yeah.
we will have a reactive state rather than intentional, right? Being intentional with our,
Exactly.
yeah.
I like to use this, what I call my quantum self model, which is really the most authentic part of you that knows how we want to respond in those moments, but so often get hijacked. And the way I explain it is it's almost like this molecule, but on the outside of the molecule is these four pillars. And it's what I say, the four pillars of self-awareness. And when we create balance in those, which is unique to all of us, we can access this quantum self and the behaviors of that quantum self. So I love acronyms. So self to me means that's my sovereign. Like I'm making the rules for me and how I want to respond. I'm not responding how I'm told a parent should respond or how I grew up with. It's my own, I'm stepping out of that programming. Then E is empowered. I'm showing up in a way that I'm confident, connected to this piece of me. And then L is love, which is
Mm,
I'm connected to love. And then F is focused within, because if I'm focused within, I have the answers of how I'd like to respond.
yeah.
It's when
That's
I'm focused outside that I'm in that reaction mode. And
yeah.
so we access this quantum self with self-love, which is self-care. It's the things that we do to help us show up this way, and also the voice in our head. Because if that voice in our head is always beating us up, it doesn't matter what we do. It
Oh my
just
god.
tanks.
Yeah.
The second one is self-regulation, which is our emotional intelligence. What it is taking radical responsibility for our emotional state while releasing responsibility for others.
Mhm.
And then it's self discovery, which is witnessing the thoughts and beliefs in our own head that are driving our feelings and reactions. And then the last one is self worth, which is really to me setting boundaries.
Yeah.
When I feel worthy, I will set these boundaries. So when I create this balance in this, then I can access this quantum self. I can show up in this way. And so when I'm not, I know to look within. What am I missing here? There was a period a couple weeks ago where I was much more snappy. Patience was just, I was just not in it. And I'm like, okay, what's going on for me? And it was like, oh, I gave up my morning routine mostly a couple weeks ago and it's finally catching up with me.
Yeah.
I haven't been working out. I haven't been, using my time in an empowered way, and it's catching up with me. And by shifting that, my kids' behavior changed because
Yeah.
I was engaging with them differently.
Yeah. Well, and you come with a different energy as well,
Oh,
right? When
absolutely.
we're depleted and I know that the term self-care has been misused. I think it's been abused lately, right?
Yes, yes.
There's a very powerful component to self-care for moms. Self-care is not getting, 2 minutes to use the bathroom. That's just
Yeah,
life. Like you should have those boundaries in place where your kids understand. Sure, they might
right.
want you in, but whatever. My kids now know if I'm in the bathroom and you come in, you get what you get.
Yeah.
Like free reign, whatever. But I
Yeah.
know what I need to do. But when it's something that is really, intentional as far as I need an hour out, 3 times a week just to be with me, right?
Mhm.
Even if you're an extrovert, sometimes they actually have a harder time with this, I think, than introverts. But taking that time to focus in on who you are besides being mom. I work with that
Mhm.
challenge with in our business leaders all the time in our business and moms who come into a business and an entrepreneurial side of things and they lose themselves. They forget that
Mhm.
they had, you had things that filled you up and there were things that you love and that attracted you, to be the person you are and
Yeah,
connecting in with those and even just taking a time out as needed or like you were saying with a morning
absolutely.
routine or if it's a fitness, activity. What is it you
It's
love?
I say there's these, like, 3 buckets. It's like, what do I need to feel energized, rested, and connected? Connected to me, connected to others, connected to something greater. So for me, like, self-care for me is I have cuddle time with each boy. There's, almost 9 and 10, but before bed every night, we have our cuddle time. That's self-care to me because that's,
Love
like, creating that connection with them, which is vital to me. So I think it's a balance of setting those boundaries where I'm going to sit down for my dinner. I'm going to drink enough water during the day. I'm going to do these things. And it's also recognizing that maybe on a weekly or a monthly basis, I need a girls' night. I need an hour to myself. So it's kind of the balance of the little things and the bigger things. I like
absolutely.
to say, though, the small things done with intention matter more than the big things done without purpose.
Yep.
I can go get a massage and then I could be thinking about that to-do list in my head the whole time. It's not doing a thing for me.
That's right. Yep. And then it builds up, right? Those
Yeah.
little things, like you said, it could go on for a few weeks and you don't catch it, and suddenly it's there.
Mhm.
You're
Yeah.
like, I have hit my point where
Right.
I realize something's going on with me.
Yeah.
And I think it takes, a certain amount of slowing down too, maybe. We live in such a fast paced society, and I don't think that's ever going to change But as moms, we take on it all. We take everything
Yes.
on. We hold the
Right.
burden of it all. And
Right.
having that timeout or having that little break or whatever that looks like in your self-care routine, it allows us those moments to breathe and to be a little more introspective, putting our phone down for, that time. I
Yeah.
used to take my phone in when I take a bath. I would scroll while I was laying in the bathtub, which is super
Yeah.
dangerous because I know when it's drop it in the tub. So far I haven't. But I actually had to stop. I pulled away and stopped because I realized that if I took the time just to soak and just to when my kids were all asleep and I could spend half an hour, 45 minutes in the bath, I would have the most amazing kind of brain freeing time to just think, right? Quiet time to think and go,
Yeah.
now I'm connecting into who I am. Now I recognize what's going on with, inside of me. Or I can reevaluate how things went through the day, whatever that looks like. So
Right.
I love that
Yeah.
idea of cuddles with your kids. That's our bedtime routine. I've
Yeah.
got three. My oldest is 13, my youngest is 6. And they'll all pile into our bed and we read a chapter of a book every night together. So it's just our little moment. It's our time. Even when we're traveling, it doesn't matter if we're in a hotel or anywhere. We
Yeah.
have a routine and they look forward to it. So it is
Exactly.
important to do what works for your family, do what works with your kids, but find that connection where you find some joy, right? We
Yeah.
can really get lost in the struggles of the day to day.
We lose a lot. I mean, we have the potential, I should say, to lose a lot. We have the potential to lose our voice, which many of us do. We have the potential to lose our space, our time, our schedule, like all of those things that gives our mind that veil of control.
Yeah,
Parenting takes that and kind of crushes it in so many ways. And it's learning to interact with the change from an empowered place versus kind of resigning ourselves to what is, because that's where the resentment lies, that's where the frustration lies, that's where I become depleted. Because if I'm just reacting to what is, I'm not going to ask for what I need in a way that I'm actually going to get it. I mean, I remember, back in the early years, my kids are 15 months apart. It was crazy in the beginning. It was because I wasn't doing anything. I'd say, okay, I'm gonna work out, but then, oh, they need me. I don't know how they're gonna be. Oh, they need something to eat. And it would just finally be the end of the day. I'm like, oh, I never did that workout. I have the clothes on, but I never actually did the thing.
yeah,
And it was learning to be like, no, I'm taking this time. And so at first it was like my kids were little. They had like the iPad with a snack in the basement where I was working out, and they try to ask me questions. I'm like, I'm not talking. I'm not talking. And I would just hold that boundary and they learn it over time. But it had to be a learning experience for me first, that it was okay to not almost invent their needs so that I didn't have to meet mine, right? Like, not that they don't have these needs, but that I was putting those in front of me. And it's that most of parenting, I like to say 95% of parenting happens outside of the moments we're actively parenting.
that's so true.
Because if I'm not doing all of this stuff here in the moment,
Yeah,
I'm just reactive. I'm yelling, I'm pushing, I'm throwing out consequences. It's all the things I do the rest of the time, because otherwise it's an either or. If I'm not taking care of me and my child needs to eat, then I have to choose them eating.
yeah,
And it's an either or. But if I'm creating the space for me, it gets to be a both and.
yeah,
I've met my needs and I can show up for them in this way. So it doesn't have that resentment and then guilt and then all of the things that brew under the surface that continue to play out in how we're engaging.
yeah. And I think it's simple in our day to, like you're saying, to let it get to the end of the day and either you're too tired or you're done, right? You're
Right.
you're out of it all. You've drained yourself out for the day.
Yeah.
Does time management play into that? And I don't love that term, but just the boundaries and just being able to say, this is what our Monday to Fridays kind of look like. And maybe the weekends are a free for all, whatever,
Yeah.
you know?
I've recognized that I need that structure. And I say that to my kids because I'm homeschooling right now,
Me too.
and I have a business and I need to take time for myself. So I need that structure. So for my kids, I'm like, I am available to do school from 8 to 11. These are your lessons. If you don't want to do them at that time, that's fine. And this is the expectation that's kind of laid out. And I needed that structure to move through my day,
Same.
and I recognized that I tried working at night, did not work for me. I don't function well that way. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning and having that time for me. So it's recognizing our unique needs within the structure of what we need. And often we feel like putting these boundaries on is selfish.
Yeah.
It's not recognizing their wants and needs, but wants and needs aren't in conflict.
Yep.
Like your child can, I shouldn't say wants and needs, but wants, preferences, desires. I mean, needs are needs, but wants,
Yeah.
preferences, desires. It's often the solution that we feel because we live in that either or.
Yeah.
Either I have to show up for them right now or I get to show up for myself. It's learning to incorporate the structure that we need to create that both and more. And for sometimes that may be like if you're in the thick of it with the little ones, I mean, there's a time where yes, their needs trump ours.
Yeah.
Those first few, first few months, absolutely. But then we can start to say like, I just lost 20 minutes scrolling social media. Was that the best use of my time? Or could I have gone and done a meditation? Or could I have, or yes, I get that the dishes need to be done. And can I take 5 minutes to do some breathing or some stretching first before I tackle that? Because the thing is, when we are doing those things,
Yeah.
it almost expands time because I'm much more productive. I'm much more engaged with it. I'm not constantly trying to like check out. My mantra in the early years was, I can't do this. I can't do this. And what do you think every moment felt like? I can't do this.
It is. Yeah.
That's how I was living my days and living my life. I can't do this. And the turning point was like I was in my room crying with the door closed. My kids are on the other side crying for me. And I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I cannot do this. And I was like, okay, something needs to change. I don't know exactly what it is now, but something needs to change because this isn't what I want. Like nobody's happy here because our chaos underneath when we're just trying to go through the motions in this way is energetically creating that chaos in our kiddos. And that's what's playing out in their behavior. When I have clients come, they're focused right. I want to change my child's behavior. And at the end, they always say, this isn't what I thought I needed to work on. However, everything has changed.
That's powerful because we are quick to not point the finger necessarily, but we are quick to look outward
Oh
and
yeah,
not so quick to look inward because that means work, and we don't have time
exactly.
for that. We don't have time for more work. But
Right.
said, like, I know for me personally, if things have triggered me, for example, something happens and like you were saying, I know that I've hit a point where I'm losing my, on my kids more than is necessary if there's a necessary amount. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Just the typical. And I'm doing the same. I'm homeschooling, running multiple businesses from home, in lockdown right now, still in Ontario, like just craziness, dealing with mental health, with my kids as well,
Mhm.
all these things. And it can be very easy to look at them and to just go, okay, I can fix that and I can help you do that better. But in the long run, it's my wellness. It's where I'm at. And you're right. If it's something energetically that we're brewing,
Mhm.
storm comes out. I swear, when we're brewing it, it comes out in our kids.
Oh
They're
yeah.
they're like the perfect little conductors for our energy, right? And
Mhm.
I know for a fact, and it took me years to realize that. It really did. This wasn't something I understood right away. But I've worked with families, in a birthing aspect and with, newborns and in those stages where you've got mamas who are dealing with postpartum depression and stuffing it down and are dealing with anxiety and are stuffing it down. And you watch this come out in their babies and you go,
Mhm.
they're not understanding how that's possible. There is a very real energetic connection between us and the people around us, but especially our kids. Like they're
Yeah, oh
the most
yeah.
powerful little conductors, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, because especially up till age 7, they are living in their subconscious mind, which means they're in that low wave, theta state, which means they're just in almost like a hypnotic state, just taking everything in. So they're super suggestible to things that we don't even know we're conveying.
Yeah.
And this is why trying to maintain that veil of patience on the outside will never work
It's just a
because
waste
if
of energy, really, in the end.
right, it is because and it's exhausting because I'm exerting so much mental energy, physical energy, everything, holding the stem of these emotions back just so I can appear to be calm to get them to bed so then I can go veg out and whatever because I haven't been managing it all day and they are giving it back. Anytime I notice my kiddo's behavior start escalating, I'm like, how have I been showing up?
Yes.
How have I been showing up today? And if I can make that change, if I have the capacity to make that change, because that's what we're really creating here, the capacity to shift, the capacity to come back to a state of awareness, the capacity to let go of the feelings and thought or the thoughts driving those feelings.
Yeah.
It's not just that we can do that, we create the access to it.
Yeah.
We build this foundation that gives us the access. This is why every time we go to bed at night, we're saying, I'm just going to do better tomorrow. It never works. It never
The
works.
mom guilt recap, right?
Oh my
That's
gosh,
always
and you're
how it
not doing
starts.
anything wrong by the fact that it doesn't. It's just not how the systems altogether work. We can't just quote unquote be better.
Mm,
We have to create a change from the ground up. Then we can show up better.
yeah,
Then we can hold boundaries over and over and over because kiddos, they're hardwired to test boundaries. Like that's in their wiring. That's how they learn to trust us. That's how they learn what the rules are when we hold those boundaries. But when we're energetically not able to hold those boundaries, we're just throwing out consequences. It doesn't work. But when we start to hold those boundaries and hold space for the emotional response to those
they
boundaries,
push back, yeah.
this is where the shift begins to happen. But that has to be something that we give ourselves capacity to do. We can't just magically show up this way.
So what would you say, let's say, to a parent who, up to this point knows that things they haven't been showing up in this way, or that they aren't, healed up and whole themselves, and there's
Mhm.
there's obviously other things that need to happen,
Sure.
and there's healing and work that we go through for, all the
Yeah.
ways we were raised and all
Yep.
the habits we learned and all of
Sure.
that. To undo those dances, I always say, like
Sure.
you learn to dance a certain rhythm, a certain way your whole life, and then you've
Mhm.
got these little beings who are given to you to literally undo it.
Yeah.
Really, I mean,
Yeah.
there's the good stuff that you've learned, but then there's all the negative habits and rituals you've learned. So what would you say is something that a mom who or a parent who is in that routine, who has fallen into that, maybe
Mhm.
stuffing it down or whatever, let's use
Sure.
that for example. What could be a practical, like, step one, step two, first steps for them to,
Yeah, absolutely.
as
So I would say first,
much as we love to say, like, you're gonna get in there and you're gonna find these, all these parts of you, and you're gonna tap into your subconscious. We can do that over time, especially working with someone like yourself.
it's always over time. It's always over time, sure. But the first thing is meet yourself where you are. Like, don't try to get to step Z when you're on step A. Because
Right.
so often what we do is we focus on the outcome that we want and we
Mm,
become so tied to the outcome of who we think we want to be that we only see tunnel vision
that's
of
true.
what that is. And what overwhelm is we've told the brain what we want, it can't figure out how to get there.
Right.
So overwhelm happens. And when overwhelm, we just start swirling, more frustration, more energetic attraction of chaos. So it's meeting yourself where you are. What that could look like is, can I take 5 minutes a day to start meditating to calm my stress response? Can I even move my body for 5 minutes a day because we're living in that stress response and we're not completing the stress response.
Mm,
So those can be some just 5 to 10 minutes. Because the thing is, if we try to bite off a bigger chunk than that, the subconscious is like, oh no, no, no.
that's
This
it.
is this is too scary. We may not be happy here, but we're alive. We're good here. Don't try to change this too much. So if I say I'm going to work out
Comfortable.
30 minutes a day
Yeah.
for 5 days, we're not going to do it. We might for the first 2 days, we get up, we get going, and then day three hits, and our mind comes up with some excuse as to why we can't or we're too tired. And that's because we've tried to bite off too big of a chunk. So chunk it down, meet yourself where you are. And then what are the little things I can do in my day? Am I drinking enough water? Because
Yeah.
2% dehydration zaps our energy stores, therefore our patience and our ability to access it, huge.
Yeah.
So am I drinking enough water? Am I, sitting down to eat my meals? Am I, you know, showering regularly, at the very least washing my face, can I wash my face? And a couple of those are first thing when I get up in the morning, can I have a water bottle next to my bed and start my day with water? Can I go splash ice cold water on my face because that activates my vagus nerve, which
Yeah.
helps me to start the day with calm. So
Mhm.
those are two ways: is meet yourself where you are, take off a tiny chunk of what you can start with, and then how can you incorporate self-supporting actions throughout your day? And that will start to build your ability to then add a little more and to add a little more and to start questioning your beliefs or working out more, whatever that may be, whether it's having the capacity to work with a coach or take a program. Because the thing is, if you don't already have some capacity, now some of us even need that coach to hold us accountable just to start it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that can be fine too. Just know that it's a long journey. It's not a start and an end that we're going to get to. And your kids are resilient. So if
Oh
you're
my
on
goodness.
the 12-month plan here for creating some change in your life,
Yeah.
that's okay. You
Mhm.
don't have to create this change in a week to save your kids from your yelling.
Yeah.
Take one step tomorrow that you didn't take today,
Yeah.
and just one foot in front of the other. And if you keep going, even if you some days take a break or fall off, but then you step back into it. So being around like-minded moms, listening to podcasts like this where you're being supported,
Yeah.
all of those things are vital to staying in it, because change has, as I see it, 4 layers. We have the desire for change. We can stand desire all the time. Then we have knowledge. So we think we need to know more, so we add more knowledge, which is great. We add more knowledge, we learn something. Then we adults learn by implementing. So we need to implement that knowledge. Implementation is long and messy and hard. So what we do is we start implementing. It never goes like the book says. So we think we need more knowledge and we jump back over to knowledge and we keep staying in that cycle. But
Mhm.
implementation is, it begins with reflection. How did today go? What went well today? What's an area of growth for me? What am I grateful for? What do I want to commit to tomorrow? Then it's awareness where we're able to, in the moment, catch ourselves before we can embody it. And that's when we get to trust. But we get so off kilter in that messy implementation phase
Yeah.
that we stay stuck. I need to know more. I need to know more. Because also, many of us have this story of like, I'm not enough. And how does that show up? I don't know enough. So I need to know more. I need to know more. And I still remember like reading like when I first began my journey into conscious parenting and reading the books, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing it all wrong. I've messed up my kids. So then I'm stuck in that guilt, and that keeps me out of implementation. And so
Yeah.
this is where beginning where you're at, and what's the first step? Am I in a community that I can lean on for support during this and ask questions? And then maybe I increase my capacity to learn some more and allow myself to implement. But it's change doesn't happen on the timeline that we would love it to happen.
Right.
It happens on the timeline that we give it when we commit to it long term.
And it doesn't happen the way, like you said, the way we maybe expect. That's why I'd rather just throw the expectations out the window and just start at step one.
Yes.
Here we go right now. And if
I
you
like to
can work that, through each
yeah,
step without getting froze somewhere in the, and that's what
yes.
coach is great for, because you can kind of get yourself to a place of step one and then have someone hold your hand through the next bit and
Exactly.
pull you along
Exactly.
when you need a little pull. Yeah.
Exactly. I like to say preferences instead of expectations. Like expectations are this future oriented, desire where we become laser focused on the only solution that we believe is going to
Yeah.
get us the outcome we want,
Totally
which means
it
we
is.
don't see all the ones around us.
Yeah.
But if I have preferences, I could prefer it go one way and then, oh, it didn't.
Yeah.
And then if it does, I'm like, oh, look at that. It did. I have the same thing with my kids. I could expect bedtime to go a certain way, or I could prefer it to go a certain way.
Yeah.
When it doesn't, I can adjust and course correct. When it does, oh, it feels like, unicorns are floating on rainbows, right? But that's
Absolutely.
so rare that, but we often feel that that's the expectation we're holding.
Yeah.
And we're always working towards it and working towards it and working towards it. So what are we doing every day? Failing.
Failing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because that's something that I actually started doing with my kids before I even looked at myself, because I wasn't there yet. But I knew that my kids needed to understand gratitude, and that was something that I was very conscientious of with them. And just in the situations we've been in with our family, and some of the, I don't know, it's not special treatment, but they've had some great opportunities in their lives that I never had, and experiences I've never, as a kid, never got to have. And
Mhm.
I'm very conscientious of that, and I want to make sure
Yeah.
they understand how great that is.
Yeah.
But we started doing our, bedtime gratitudes, where it would be, what were your wins today? And Daddy was amazing at this too. My husband was fantastic. He's very good this way. He'd be like, what were your wins today? What did you do well? What did you feel proud of? And we got
Mhm.
into, we did this not every night, but we got into a pretty steady, conversation as our kids were growing.
Yeah.
It came to a point where they started asking us that then at bedtime.
Yeah.
So we'd
We
have the
did.
conversation, they'd ask us, and it hit me one night in the bathtub, one of those moments where I was like, feeling all the mom guilt and just feeling like an utter failure, and that idea of, I'm not moving forward, I'm falling into bad habits again,
Yeah.
those patterns. And all of a sudden that little voice was in my head saying, but what were your wins today? And
Oh, I love it.
just a simple little for me, it was like a simple one step. It was like, you know what? I do need to change how I end my day. I
Yeah.
needed to change how I finished off. I needed to do a couple of things. I needed to do a brain dump at the end of the day. It sounds so funny, but I really had to get like my tasks out of my head for the next day. I would keep my day planner. I'm a pen and paper girl, so day planner next to me. I'd look at what was coming up for the next day. I'd make sure I was planned for it before bed. I'd get down any info in my head I needed to get out. But then those gratitudes and just being able to say, you know what, I really rocked lunch today,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Whatever it was,
You know, it
exactly.
was great.
Yeah, yeah, it's those little
It's terrible, but
things
yeah, it was a write off, but yeah.
that we can come back to, and there were 2 I had 2, examples of something being reflected back to me recently when I was kinda having those moments, and one was my my 10-year-old tends to whenever his brother doesn't agree with something, he, like, wants to, like, beat it into him that this is the way it's gonna happen, and we were going for, we have an old Mustang, and we're going for a ride, and my 8-year-old didn't wanna go, and my 10-year-old really wanted to go, and so what I hear from my 10-year-old is, "How do we support you to be good with this?" And I was like, "Oh, alrighty then, let me just sit back here." Like, it was, like, such a shock. I was like, "Wow, I just wanna acknowledge you for creating this space for." And then what happened is we all came together, we figured out a plan, and we went. And then I had another moment where I was in the failure state. I was trying to work and hold a boundary, and they just weren't following it.
Mhm.
And so my yelling is just really raised voice now. Like I rarely actually lose it. And so I kind of got to that point where I was just like, ugh. And then I kind of was like, I need space. I need you to leave. Right. And so my son comes back in a few minutes. He goes, can I come in? I said, sure. And he comes up and he's like, are you okay? And I was like, bud, not really. I'm kind of struggling right now. And he just stood there, like held space for me to have this. And I was like, I'm scared. I'm scared I'm not teaching you. I'm scared I'm not getting this right. Like I just kind of shared what I was feeling. I wasn't dumping the emotions on him, but just sharing my experience. And here's what I get back. Something I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically like, Mom, you can't be failing because you're trying. Sometimes it doesn't work. It can't work all the time, but you know what does work. And then you try again and you just keep trying. Like he just basically reflected back to me everything. And so I sat there and I was like, literally, I can't be failing because the things that matter are happening.
It just came out of your mouth. I'm doing
Right.
something
I'm
right.
I'm
Yeah,
doing something right. I'm holding space for feelings. I'm sharing how to communicate in an empowered way.
I
We're
love
engaging differently. So all of those times when I feel like I can't get the schedule right, or
that.
they're not. I have to hold this boundary with doing school again, or they're not learning the way what they're supposed to do this year. We're at the end of the year and I just want to be done. Like all of those things, it's kind of like then this gets reflected back and you're like, so it's we often are looking for these big tangible wins that my child is cooperative, or they held this bound I held this boundary, or bedtime went smooth. Like we have these tangible ideas of what success looks like.
Mhm.
Yet what if it's just how we show up every day?
Yes. Yeah, and how
And
we
we
see them showing up too, because
exactly.
it's a reflection, and sometimes that can be a negative reflection, and we have to acknowledge that and
Oh yes.
take ownership, right?
Yes.
But there's
Hmm.
so many beautiful moments like those ones we've just shared. Those
Yeah.
are beautiful moments, and I have so many of them the day that I go, and I'll text my hubby sometimes, and I think this is important too, because as moms, I know sometimes we wear this and we own it, and we also see it, but our partners, sometimes our partners or whoever's in their life misses some of these parts, and I'll text him and I'll say, do you know what, our oldest just said to me? Like, he just told me I'm doing a great job. And I'm like, and he'd be like, oh, that's so sweet. And I'm like, yeah, like just having some acknowledgement from the efforts you make is
Yes.
huge, right? And you're not going to always get that. Another thing I realized not that long ago, actually, it was probably about a month ago, is I started asking, and this is a very vulnerable thing for me because almost perfectionist in the way I attack things and the way I want to do self improvement, even, those expectations. I
Mhm.
love what you said about preferences. I am so going to take that away because that's a big one for me is learning to set that aside, but actually involving my kids in my self development. Because I
Mhm.
was doing some webinars where I was being trained or I was doing some self development. I did a tapping program training where I was learning how to do it. And the kids, I got them involved. Like we were practicing at bedtime, doing tapping with bedtime things to
So do
say.
I. Yes.
Yeah, and I
Yep.
loved it. But it was really neat because I also had a chance to say to them, listen, what's your favorite thing about me? And when do we ever have, I don't know. I don't know that I've ever thought to say that. But we
Mhm.
were asked to say, ask someone close to us that question or ask somebody in your life that question. And I'm like, why wouldn't I ask my kids?
Yeah.
It's like they're the ones that I'm in direct, responsibility for. We're
Mhm.
kind of needing to work together as a team to a certain extent, to an extent. I'm still the boss
Yeah.
overall, but there's
Right.
still work that happens, right?
Right.
And I don't know what they need from me or how they view me. How do I even know what? Because
Yeah.
like you said, you do get tunnel vision where you only see their issues or you only see your failures.
Right.
That was a
And
little
sometimes all we have to do is acknowledge their experience. We don't have to give
yeah,
them everything they want. Like
yeah,
just this week, so we have a stray cat. I don't know where it came from. It's obviously not a feral cat, so I'm trying to find who its owners is. But in the meantime, we're kind of feeding it. My boys would love a cat, and it's just not going to happen. It's just we have a dog, we have a guinea pig. It's not going to happen.
yeah,
And my son kept, but pushing the boundary, pushing, pushing, pushing. And finally, what I said was, I wish we could always give you everything that you ever wanted. I would love to be able to do that. And in this instance, we're not getting a cat. And it was like finally being heard and recognizing that, okay, mom gets how important this is to me. And I said, I know how much you love animals. I know that you seeing this cat outside is hurting you right now. And we're not bringing the cat in the house. Like it can be both situations.
yeah,
This is where we often fall off is that we think there can only be one truth. But when we're actually connected to our quantum self, as I like to say, there can be two truths.
yeah.
You can really want this, and we're not bringing the cat in the house.
Yeah.
Like both can be true. I don't have to fight against you wanting it to make my life easier so I don't have to hold this boundary that it's not coming in the house.
Well, and I think that's as adults or grown-ups even, it's almost that assertion of you need to see and feel and hear and believe what I do.
Oh yeah.
And it is missing that idea that there are other truths. Like
Right.
what you it's when you those optical illusions where you look
Right.
at a picture one way and one person sees one and
Right.
one sees another. That is literally how I see our kids is they're all little people, they're all human beings, and we all have our own version of the truth. So I love that
Mhm.
example because my daughter's the same. She's the one who would rescue every animal there is. We now have chickens in our kitchen. So that's what happened.
Oh, we
Yeah.
had a little baby
America.
wood duck one time. It came up to it imprinted on us. It would follow us around. I had the kids kiddie pool in our kitchen. I'm like pureeing like blueberries and melon for it. Like, and what you don't know about ducks is when they don't have their flock, they cry
All the
all the
time.
time. The only time this thing would sleep is I have my hand right here, a cup right in my hand here. I'm like, okay, this we're finding a rescue because I'm not doing this. But
Totally, but
yes, it's the
that's what
same.
we learned. We learned with her was that same idea of it can't be everything right now. But it's been interesting to have the conversation about what she might like as she gets older. Oh, good. It's
Yeah.
been fun to talk to her about what it might be like as she gets older, right? Do you want to have a
Yeah.
farm? Do you
Right.
want to take in animals? What
Right.
animals would you like to have? And it's that almost that detour of, hey,
Yeah.
there's a place for this, and I honor that in you. It's not my
Yeah.
place right now.
Right. I'm already taking care of a guinea pig and a
That's
dog.
right.
Like this isn't happening.
I got the life.
And we can hold space for the fact that you would love it to happen. It doesn't have to feel like this conflict. So often we feel like we've been as kids because it didn't feel good in our bodies. But conflict is there's a difference in opinion, there's a difference in want, there's a difference in desire, but that doesn't have to mean animosity.
Yeah,
But what we often learned as kids that that's what it was because we wanted things and most of the time we were told in a way that didn't feel good
I'll
because
slow it down.
we may not have had parents who had access to validating our experience
Yeah,
to validate the feelings we felt in our body so it felt like conflict so now we avoid conflict,
yeah,
which means we feel like I can't validate that he wants this because that's giving in.
right.
When really it's all we as humans want to do is to be heard,
To be heard.
to be seen. Yeah.
Yeah, acknowledge what I'm feeling, acknowledge what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And again, I think because they're smaller than us, it can be easy to just override it, right? I think that's pretty common. I fall into that all the time where I'm like, I'm too busy or I'm being impatient or something's going on that I can't focus at that moment. And learning a strategy of some sort to be able to say, I'd love to hear more about that right now, or I'd like to hear more about that, but I can't right now. Can you give me
Yes.
5 minutes? Let me finish up what I'm doing. So I'm getting better at that.
Yes. I like saying when we
Little
hold
bit.
boundaries in like this closed container that creates success. So what does that look like? Well, so if I need, so my child asked me for a glass of water, I'm in the middle of something. I say to him, you can get it now, or I can get it for you 5 minutes when I'm done. Like I'm creating, you choose, but this is what I'm available for. This is what I'm open. But often what we do is we're just like, you know, I'll get it in a minute. I'll get it in a minute. And then they keep asking because we haven't created that container for them.
Right.
Or we just say, no, get it yourself. And then it feels like anger, but we can still connect with them and hold the boundaries around what we're doing. And it doesn't mean that boundaries boundaries don't necessarily get easier. They seem to flow a little bit more, but they're always there
Yeah.
because often the expectation is I'm just going to set it and it's going to happen. But
Yeah.
what boundaries are to me is you put anyone, but you put a child in a dark room, and I like to say you have two doors out. I'm and there's no lights, there's no windows, the doors are closed. They learn where the doors are by feeling their way around. If
Mm,
we're always moving the walls, they can't relax their energy to figure out where the door is to open it to go out. So boundaries are a sense of trust. The other analogy I love is you get on a roller coaster and you pull the bar down, and before it takes off, the attendant goes around and checks the bar. You
mhm.
don't want the bar to give. You want to see that it's locked so now you can relax and enjoy the ride.
That's right.
The kids want to relax, but when we're moving boundaries or we're using boundaries from a reactive place versus a proactive place. I can't change the past, but I can be like, okay, what can I put in place to
Yeah.
create maybe a different choice next time?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that, like, we've never moved our garbage can, and my 10-year-old still leaves the wrapper on the counter. And every time I'm like, okay, bud, you seem to have forgotten the garbage is still where still in that cupboard. And I could get angry every time. I
Yeah.
absolutely could because he's 10. I've told him
Mhm.
so many times, or I could just be like, "Oh, fine, I'll just throw it away." But neither of them are holding the boundary
That's right.
that, this is what's gonna happen. And so, yes, it takes more energy, but it's a long-term
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
It's not like punishments and consequences are a short-term fix,
Yeah.
but usually creating a long-term problem
Yeah.
because behavior is the downstream effect of not needing have wanting to express a feeling or trying to meet a need.
Yeah.
So if all I do is focus on the behavior and I don't focus on what's behind it, I'm getting more and more of the behavior. If I punish the behavior, I'm getting more of the behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's almost
Well,
like a reinforcement at that point, right? The
yeah,
behavior itself becomes the focus, not why did
it
I.
absolutely does become the focus and I'm trying to correct the behavior
Yeah.
when behind it, there's an example I love to share where my younger son was turning 6 and it was the day of his birthday and I'm trying to get everything ready and my 7-year-old was just first he like threw something on the floor and then he like threw something that hit his brother in the head. I'm trying to comfort his brother. I say, "Can you get me an ice pack?" He goes and dumps the ice trays onto the floor. I'm like, I just wanted to send him up to his room and be done. Like, I don't have time for this, right? But I was like, okay, something's going on here. So I sent him out and I kind of cleaned up. And then it came in and I gave him I put him in what I said were my hug handcuffs. And he wasn't free until I gave him 100 kisses. And he was kind of laughing and behaviors disappeared because here was a day that was all about his brother. And he needed to know he was still loved and worthy of attention, but if I had focused on the behavior and punished the behavior, he still needed to feel loved.
Yeah.
So often we're told that, well, if I give my child the attention, I'm reinforcing the behavior. However, if I can look beyond the behavior and once he's calm and connected, I could say, hey, next time you need my attention,
Yeah.
just say, Mom, I need a hug.
Yeah.
Mom, I need a few minutes to cuddle or whatever the case may be. But they're using the best strategy that they know
Yeah.
to meet that need or express that feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes negative attention is attention.
That's right.
So if I had punished him and given him
Obvious.
that attention,
Yeah.
he would have gotten what he needed, but not in a way that actually filled his cup. So
Yeah.
he would have used the behavior again.
Yeah, so true. One last thing I'll share with you,
Yeah.
and I'm pulling it in only because I know our audience will understand it. So
Mhm.
in my business, we do a lot of energy scanning,
Oh, yeah.
biometric scanning, and I remember we had moved from the house that my daughter was born in. She was born at home in this house and grew up in it until she was almost 4. I hadn't started school yet. We moved to a new house. She started school like a half year earlier because she's a January baby, so she missed the deadline. But I asked, can she start and just go? Because she was more than ready and wanted to go to kindergarten. So we started early, and she just kept repeating it when she got to September. But
Yeah.
a move we had a new baby and started school. Well, the yelling, she was just yelling and angry all the time. And she's more my more feisty one, but like it went to a 10. And I remember same thing. I would just respond with, what I thought was good parenting at the time was, well, I've got to deal with this issue. And that's all I did. It was as an ECE was learn, the child psychology of how to deal with the child. And I wasn't in a good place emotionally at the time either. All the transitions I was going through, not even thinking how that's affecting a 4-year-old. So I actually pulled up my scanner and I was a friend who was like, well, have you done a scan on her? I'm like, no, why? She's healthy. Like, why would I do that? They're like, I think you should. So I put on her belly and I scanned her. And no word of lie, I started crying. And I don't cry easily. And she was sitting on my lap while I did this. And she didn't see me, but I had tears pouring down my face when I saw her results within a minute because they're all emotion based. So it comes up with suggestions on what, essential oils to use energetically. And it was all the oils for grieving. And I'm
Oh,
like, what? She's 4. What is she
yeah.
grieving? Right. And it was all about grief and forgiveness and those deep emotions. And regardless of what I used with her, in a more oil based, it opened my eyes to go, I'm going to give her a hug the next time she starts losing it. Because
Mhm,
that's not my natural response. I'm not a hugger. I'm not a physical love, mama. I have to remind myself to be touchy with my kids. So,
mhm,
and she is. And so I grabbed her. I remember the next time doing this, and she was like stiff as a board, grabbed her and just asked her if I could hold her for a few minutes. And she melted, like
mhm,
just fell apart in my lap.
mhm,
And it makes me emotional now, even thinking about it, because we did this for months afterwards. And there were times I still got it wrong. I still was like, oh, right, right, right. This is what's happening right now.
right.
But it got her through it in a really powerful way for me because I just needed that reminder that these guys are struggling too. This is a big change in her life. So even for our younger mamas who have, toddler stages going through, a new baby coming into the house, these all play a pretty vital role that in our own life we can miss. That,
Yes.
like you said, up to the age of 7, they're operating in a different realm,
Right.
operating in a space, and our energy dramatically affects them.
Absolutely. And to be able to offer that connection, we need to be connected with ourselves first.
Yeah.
To be able to, give that hug from a true place of affection,
Yeah.
not like I had a client one time and she was hugging out of obligation. Like her daughter was a little older,
Yeah.
with anxiety, and she was like, well, I'm supporting her through it, but she felt like she was trapped, like she had to hug her.
Yeah.
So it wasn't offering like she was resentful that her daughter couldn't process this on her own.
Right.
So she had to hug her. And what it came through was that she was actually creating the codependency. Her daughter thought she needed her to hug her. Because
Right.
when they hugged, it didn't actually support her. So her daughter, like, right? So all we did was like shift to how can you offer connection in these moments? How can you trust that your daughter's fully capable of
Yeah.
handling this? She doesn't need you to fix it. She
Right.
just needs you to hold the energetic space for it. I talked to her the next week and it had gone down by like 80%.
Oh, I love it.
Like just by changing how she energetically shows up, and to be able to do that, we have to create that capacity within. That's why I talk about blissful motherhood, because it really is about finding our joy when we are so incredibly just tuned in and happy. Not that we live there all the time. I keep saying that because I think we think that I'm then searching for this happy. And if I
Right.
don't feel it, there's something wrong. But it's looking like, what is keeping me out of this state of well being? What is keeping me out of there? Oh, I'm not sleeping right now. I'm not eating, foods that nourish my body. I'm not drinking enough water. Like all of these things. It's like there's concrete reasons you can't access it. You're not failing. You're not doing this
Oh,
wrong.
yeah.
It's about building that foundation. And then when we can show up and we focus on, not from a place of guilt,
Right.
we focus on our happiness, joy, bliss first, we naturally are rippling that out into our family.
I love it. Yeah.
But we so often feel like to be happy, I need my husband to do this for me. I need my kids to behave like this so that I can be peaceful and happy.
Yeah.
When we shift the focus to finding that within first,
Yeah.
then everything else changes.
That's it's such a key thing to remember, and we'll leave it at this. I want to know more about how people can work with you, but it's so important, and I love that you brought that up. That we recognize that our happiness is not dependent on anyone else.
Right.
It's not dependent on anyone.
Right.
We are 100% the masters of our own happiness, and that blissful mothering is 100% within us. It's in our
Yes.
power to create. So I
Yes,
love that.
absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right, tell us where we can find you. We'll make sure it's all up in the show notes as well. But where can
Yeah,
we find you?
absolutely. So my website, irenemckennacoaching.com. That's where you can kind of learn more about me. You can also find the link to, I have a membership, which has a free basic community level to it. So you can join us over there. That again will be linked on the website, and you can find it at uh, the blissfulmomcollective.com.
Awesome.
And there's also, I have a course, Finding Your Bliss, which is you can upgrade to that if and when you're ready within the membership. But what I'd love to just invite you to first is just join the conversation, be with like minded moms
Mm,
where we are asking questions and having conversations. And if you're called to more, the opportunity is there. But first, like I said, is meet you where you're at and just begin there.
awesome. I love it. And check out your podcast. Is called.
Yes, check out the podcast. It's actually on hiatus right now because sometimes we have to learn what our capacity is. And being that I preach this, I should say, I needed to also work on that myself to be okay, be okay with it. But yes, the podcast is linked on the website, so you can catch old episodes. Thrive in Motherhood is the podcast as well.
Yeah, and there are lots of good episodes in there. You've got good content. It's all there for people to enjoy. So that's
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you so much, Irina. I hope we can
Thank
talk
you.
again. I loved our chat.
Absolutely.
It was incredible.
Thank you.
Would you like to learn more? Find me on Instagram and YouTube at Mom Days Podcast.